Some travellers coming to Singapore from Brunei and New Zealand will not be required to serve a stay-home notice. They will take a COVID-19 test upon arrival instead. The COVID-19 multi-ministry task force says general travel to Brunei and New Zealand will also be allowed. Gwyneth Teo has more on the easing of travel precautions announced earlier this evening. Gwyneth, what more details do you have for us?
We've just attended a briefing by the Transport Minister, Ong Ye Kung. He's the Transport Minister of Singapore. And he told us about more details about this easing of travel restrictions. And it's very different from previous announcements that we've heard, which have mostly focused on business travel and official travel, government travel between countries. This is really a unilateral opening up. Singapore is basically saying to travellers from Brunei and New Zealand, they may or may not be residents, but as long as they were in those countries for the past 14 days, they can come to Singapore and they will no longer have to do a 14-day stay-home notice or quarantine. Instead, they will just need to subject themselves to a COVID-19 swab test and know their results within 48 hours. And after that, they can move about freely. And it's really the first time we're really seeing people being free to move about with very, very little kind of quarantine measures needed from them. And what this really does for Singapore is that it opens up a little bit more of the economy to the world again. It lets people come here, spend money, shop here, stay in our hotels, and these are all, the travel and aviation industries have really taken a hit since February, and this measure really allows that to kickstart again. But another thing that it signals is that it's a shift from using stay-home notices as a sort of buffer period to using testing as a means of making sure that travellers, it's safe to have travellers be in Singapore and ensure that we won't have imported cases of COVID-19 in Singapore. So that's also another marker, and there were also hints given during the multi-ministry task force briefing. We've also got countries who will only have a 7-day notice now, like Macau, mainland China, territories like Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia as well. And perhaps if all goes well, these will be the next countries as well where travellers may not have to do a stay-home notice, but just do a swab test. And also, again, after that, if it's not positive, if it's negative, they're free to roam about in Singapore as well. But some, I think, might ask, is it too soon? What is sort of the risk of opening up to Brunei and New Zealand? Why Brunei and New Zealand? Well, Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung explained that these are countries where the infection rates have been quite low. It's a calibrated response. So let's listen into what he had to say.
Both countries have incidence rate well below 0.1 infection per 100,000 population. So it's equivalent or even better than Singapore. We are at 0.06. They are around that level as well. Secondly, they are also small countries, so we are really not looking at very big numbers. So today, if you look at the flight capacity, Brunei to Singapore per week is 500 seats, 2 flights a week. From New Zealand to Singapore is 4 flights a week, that's 1,002. So these are the numbers. If you multiply out by their infection rate plus the fact that we have tests when they arrive, we are really looking at very, very low risk that we can manage.
Gwyneth, Singapore will also allow general outbound travel to Brunei and New Zealand, but subject to requirements in those countries. What does this mean then for outbound travellers from Singapore?
I think what it really means for the general traveller, I think the first thing on everyone's mind is, perhaps can I go on holiday to Brunei and New Zealand? And the answer is really, this is really a unilateral thing for Singapore. And so it's not as if it's a bilateral agreement between the two countries. So if Singaporeans or any travellers from Singapore want to head to Brunei or New Zealand, they have to check the requirements for themselves. Perhaps there are also probably quarantine measures that they would have to subject themselves to when they're there, or perhaps we might not even be allowed to travel there. So realistically, what this means for Singaporeans is that travel to those countries really depends on those countries' restrictions as well. But one group of people who may benefit from this change in travel advisory is students who are studying full-time in New Zealand or Brunei. This actually may give them the opportunity to head there and finish up their studies. But really what this means overall for Singapore is an opening up, is a posture of opening opening up, rather, us saying that, okay, we are ready to open up our borders to certain countries again. Let's take it slow. Let's take it a few countries at a time. But, the analogy here is that when Singapore basically opened up as a free port, when we opened Changi Airport, it was like an invitation to airlines to come here, to set up, to start plying the route. In the same way, it's much the same way here. It's an invitation again, for travelers to come here, for us to also open up to going there again as well. And hopefully, what that would mean is that it kickstarts the economy and has travel resuming again and helps to boost everything again and recover better from COVID-19.
Don't just hop on the plane and go. Please check what are the requirements of the destination countries. Make sure that you comply with the requirements before you fly over. At the same time, when you are there, continue to exercise vigilance, continue to exercise safe distancing, and also observe the safe distancing rules in those countries so that you protect yourself and protect others.
Yeah, thanks very much for that update. Gwyneth Tier there speaking to us.